We Need Each Other is a podcast about the importance of human interaction. It provides a reminder that we are not intended to live in isolation. Human beings need each other. The things about another that piss you off and the things that take you over the moon are all opportunities to see through another's eyes, recognize their intrinsic value, and then look more deeply within ourselves to find the love that's always there. Welcome to this episode of We Need Each Other. I have been looking forward to talking to these young ladies because, you know, we're in different times now than since the murder of George Floyd. I mean, everything is pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd these days, and even the Derek Chauvin sentencing. You know, all of those things play an important part in where we are right now at this point in our human history here in this United States of America. So I'm going to start and give you the bio of this young woman. Her name is Nicole Osunsami. She is a third-year law student at Loyola Law School. She is a student member of Loyola Law School's Faculty Equity and Inclusion Committee, where she serves as a student liaison between students and faculty on diversity and inclusion matters. I love that. She served as the 2020 through 2021 president of Loyola's Black Law Student Association and is the incoming vice president of the Day Student Bar Association. In addition to her leadership roles, Nicole is also a certified law student working in juvenile innocence and fair sentencing clinic. Nicole is currently a summer associate at Goodwin Procter, focusing on cutting-edge technology and life science matters. Upon graduation, Nicole hopes to continue working in the technology space while also helping resolve the obstacles of diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. Thank you, Nicole, because there are obstacles. Thank you and welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Francesca.
And we have also Beatrice Greenberg. She is a third-year law student at Loyola Law School, graduating in May 2022. She is a certified law student in both the Juvenile Justice Clinic and the Juvenile Innocence and Fair Sentencing Clinic, where she represents indigent juveniles in the delinquency system and adults who were convicted and sentenced as juveniles. She serves as the 2020 through 2021 advocacy chair of Loyola's Black Law Students Association, as a section representative of the Criminal Law Society and a member of both Loyola Law School's Faculty-Led Equity and Inclusion Committee and Tuition Committee. She is the incoming president of the Criminal Law Society and social chair for the Black Law Students Association. Beatrice is currently a certified law clerk for the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office, where she hopes to continue working after graduation and becoming a member of the bar. Absolutely. Beatrice is an abolitionist and advocate. She hopes those ideals continue to fuel her in her life and work for decades to come. Beatrice, I'm sure that they will. So we welcome both of you to this episode of A Seat at the Table. And just to explain, I knew that they were law students at Loyola Law School, and it's just been so important to me, even before George Floyd, about our Black law students and their importance in this world, because we do live in a system of racism. Every system in this country has its connection to racism, and so much of it is upheld through our legal system. And so I'm so excited and happy to have you here talking with us today. So I'm curious from both of you, whoever wants to jump in first, what motivated you to become a lawyer? What motivated you to go to law school?
Yeah, I can start. So I was actually pre-med in undergrad. I went to Howard. I got a biology degree. I did a whole bunch of research. Upon graduation, I was actually doing breast cancer research, and it was lonely. And I was like, maybe this isn't for me. So I decided to kind of maneuver into the legal field by working at different firms. and I wanted to see if I liked it. So I worked at a couple firms in Washington, D.C., and I was doing marketing and business development. And all of the meetings I went to, there was always just white men and a couple of women. And like I was usually only the black woman or the only black person in the room whenever I was at these meetings. And then I kind of just inquired about going to law school, and then one of the lawyers pulled me aside and was like look around the room, like we need people like you. Like, you should definitely pursue this career path. And I just took that as a sign and took the LSAT, and now I'm here.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you're doing some stuff already. I mean, you're like in it, so yay, good. What about you, Beatrice?
Yeah, in undergrad, I was a political science major. I thought originally that I wanted to do politics, which is wild now thinking back on it because that's so the opposite of what I would like to do now. But in undergrad, my favorite classes were always law related, and that sort of was very eye opening for me, and I did the best in those classes as well. And so I established I think it was like a minor in criminal justice and sociology, something of that nature. I don't remember the name, but I was able to take a lot of those classes, and then also while I was in undergrad, I remember Mike Brown was murdered, and I got really active with the Black Student Association in my undergrad, and there were a lot of people there who we had a lot of conversations about, what kind of work we wanted to do and what kind of person we wanted to be and how we wanted to help people. And I just very quickly realized that I wanted to go to law school and be, fighting alongside people with a very tangible tool, which would be, your JD and your bar card. And also just that I was fascinated by law. So that decision, sort of came to me during undergrad. And then after graduating, I was working in the nonprofit space. I was in a couple of different nonprofits that were focused on, they're progressive nonprofits or civil rights organizations. And I had a good time there, but it only sort of reinforced for me that I wanted to be a lawyer, but I want to be a lawyer that is working with people every day. And to me, I don't want to sit behind a computer all day long. That's just not how I work well. And I learned that very quickly in the nonprofit space, because it's a lot of behind the scenes action before months before you get up into court. And I'm very much a courtroom person. I want to be there every day. And so that gave me a specific path in law school, which I'm now on, which is to do public defense and do criminal defense work. And so that's what I will be doing.
Yeah, so you've jumped in also. I mean, you both are a beneficial presence, That's why I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk to you, because, you're two people who are really in it and active and have an intention. So I'm curious, from both of you, post George Floyd, how does that change your perspective, or has it changed your perspective, or how are you seeing things differently? Are there greater awarenesses of changes that need to be made? Or did you already have those exact awarenesses already before? How has it changed your perspective? Either.
My perspective. So before I actually entered into law school, I wanted to do criminal defense. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have to help my people. I'm a person of color, and I just want to help my people. And after the George Floyd incident, I realized that a lot of these corporations have power, and I wanted to use their power to help my people. I feel like I can be more powerful now by being backed by like a big firm rather than like just me. So I realized that I don't have to feel guilty by going and doing work at a law firm rather than like just going into the courtroom like Beatrice was saying. I want to be able to use the resources of my firm to help my community. And that's definitely something that I realized post George Floyd.
Beautiful. Excellent. What about you, Beatrice?
I think for me, Honestly, a lot of things that have become like real big conversation pieces since George Floyd's murder are things that I think I did think about a lot, and I think knew on some level, but it's still been very enlightening because the conversations are being had now in ways that they weren't before. And I think, through law school, something that I've realized, I mean, again, this is something that I think I kind of knew, everyone knows the system is built the way that it is. It is built to oppress, but I think that throughout law school, and especially since that happened, uh, it's just become it's become clear in ways I think that it wasn't before, just how intricately built the system is to work against us and to, um, you know, to benefit a very small minority of people who are the people that designed it and run it essentially. And so even, with Chauvin's trial and his conviction, um, I think there are people are realizing that it's just not enough. Like one conviction is just not enough,
Yeah.
and that the whole system really has to be. I mean, it has to be abolished completely. But it's very clear that there is almost no winning in the sense that's like true victory nowadays because
Mm-hmm.
it's just not the system's not built to allow that to actually happen. I think that's something that I've realized on a deeper level since his murder, and the conversations that we've had afterwards about how did we get there, and the ways that we got there are years and years and years of white supremacy and
Yes, from the birth of this nation. Hmm. What is the percentage of Black students at Loyola Law School?
I don't
Do you
know
have an
this
idea?
percentage. It's small. I mean, it's really small. We just elected a new board, and we were struggling to find people to fill board seats. That's how small
Mm.
the community is at the school. But it's hard to say, especially since we were remote all of last year,
All right, yes.
exactly how many um, students there are, but it's something that you could count, easily, which I think says enough.
And the next question I was going to ask you may not have as much of a feel for because you were remote. I keep forgetting that, but I was wondering, have you recognized a shift in your white students or your non-Black students in understanding the changes that need to be made?
Um,
Either of you
I
or both?
I definitely so I have noticed a lot more like a lot more white people are vocal. I think in ways that they weren't before, and among the student population, I think definitely I definitely saw it, but I think that that's sort of it's the nature of these things when they happen. I think to me it's very frustrating because people will speak up and post on social media and show up at protests in the moment when it's hot to do so, and then things just peter out, and that has very much happened at the law school and in the like my community of peers at the school, and in general, because that's how things go. If it's not your community, if it's not your cause that you so deeply believe about, you come in and out as it's popular. Like we saw everyone posting black squares, and we saw corporation like businesses saying, we are hiring people and we are take this seriously and we're doing all these trainings, and students at my school were posting constantly on social media, but that has very much died out. I think law school especially is like a tough place in my opinion for me to expect people to remain radical or to like stay in the fight, because law school is so taxing in and of itself, and it's also a very conservative space. So it's a lot easier for people to sort of just settle back into their routine. But so, and I personally, my group of friends, like the people that I interact with a lot at school are, real progressive, pretty radical abolitionists for the most part. And so I guess it's maybe harder for me to say in general because these folks that I talk to, these white folks and non-black folks that I talk to, are very good about that and are still educating themselves and wanting to host events and panels and things and but otherwise I've definitely noticed a drop back because it in the way that the whole world just stops talking about stuff.
Mm-hmm. What have you noticed, Nikki?
Yeah, I agree with Beatrice. We've definitely seen a lot of the like performative activism, especially with law school colleagues. I feel like a lot of people feel like they have to be activists just because we are law students. But on the flip side of that, I have noticed a lot of my friends just like being more proactive and being willing to learn the issues surrounding our communities. Like they're always reaching out to me, asking me like what books they should read. Like my old roommate who was white, was reading The New Jim Crow, and there's another book called Why All the Black Kids Sit Together at the Lunch Table, I believe.
I haven't heard of that book, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she started reading that, and she was like asking me about the terminology and whether black people prefer to be called like African American or black, and I've had several encounters where people are just like willing to learn and being proactive. So I do appreciate that, and that has definitely been a shift from before. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. What shifted for me is I live in the whole metaphysical world, and I've taught classes on intuition and meditation and those kinds of things. But I started teaching a class to white people because, as you know, like you were saying, this person reached out to me, this person reached out to me. Black people were like, leave us alone. We're exhausted. Go figure it out. I mean, that's what most people were saying. And so I started teaching a class called Deconstructing Racism, Moving Through Discomfort to Action, specifically for white people, because what I wanted them to understand is, yes, you can read this book and you can hire someone or you can do those things and make this your new friend. But are you looking at your own unconscious bias and racism? Because it's in there and we see it and we feel it. So it's been my way of opening them up to themselves, not just to the situation that's happening out there, but you've got to realize what's happening inside of yourself. So all of that works together. It all works together. So you are both a part of Black Law Students Association. Is that what it's called? Black Law Students Association. Yes. Tell us what that is. What is that? You're the president, Nikki. Yeah.
So, yes, I was a former president. Black Law Student Association is a group on campus, not specifically for Black law students. Anybody can join, but it's basically just like a support group. There's so few of us on campus, so it's really important to have a tight-knit like family, almost in a sense, because law school is so taxing and so draining at times. It's really important to build that community for first years when they're coming in and throughout their time at Loyola. So we're just there like as a support system, helping Black law students and other students along the way.
And you have a position also, Beatrice. What is your position with the association?
So last year I was the advocacy chair, and it was a new position that Nikki came up with during the summer while we were BLSA had organized a protest, in honor of George Floyd and against police brutality. And I joined in a little bit on that effort. And after that was asked to join the board, which was fantastic. And so the advocacy chair position, which was new, was sort of intended to, help write this equity demands letter, this petition that we wrote to the school with a list of demands for how to make the law school more equitable and inclusive for Black students and other students of color, and then also to to work with the organization and work with the faculty on advocating for Black students at the school. So yeah, like Nikki said, I mean, it's a student, affinity group, and the intent of it is to be a source of support and comfort and community for Black students in the law school, which, as she said, is critical because it's such a stressful place, and Black students so often feel not necessarily comfortable all the time, not welcomed all the time, or included in the classroom, or when they are included, it's done in an insensitive way that or straight up racist way. And so part of my role as advocacy chair as well was to listen to students and take in those complaints and concerns about what was happening in their classrooms and on campus to them. Incidents of racial insensitivity or bias, or racial racist aggression, microaggressions, whatever it was, and relay that to other faculty members who could then talk to these professors who were being ridiculous, because students aren't necessarily comfortable in raising their own concerns to the faculty. And I think especially as a Black student or a student of color, where you are the minority in the law school, raising a complaint to a predominantly white faculty, and like the leadership at the school also being predominantly white, can be really scary, because you don't want to single yourself out further, and you don't want to be seen as, complaining, and then everyone's like, oh, all the Black students are complaining all the time. So part of the advocacy
something
chair,
to pay attention to.
Right.
To pay attention to.
Right.
Right. Yes,
right. So,
exactly.
Yeah, part of the advocacy chair position was to, be sort of the conduit between the faculty and the student body in that sense, so that students wouldn't have to feel pressured to do it themselves, and they could trust another student to advocate for them.
And,
do you think? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to go back to one of the points you made earlier about sometimes non-Black people putting the burden on Black people to learn. And one of the other reasons why Beatrice's position was created is because I feel like everybody, after post-George Floyd, everybody kind of wanted to make their institution anti-racist overnight. And it was like BLSA was getting slammed with things, and we were like, we need somebody, because we cannot keep up with all the requests and demands. So Beatrice was perfect for the position. Yeah. Thanks for accepting that.
So when there are these conflicts, these racist situations that happen with a professor, do you believe that that professor is truly unconscious of their racism, or do you believe that sometimes they realize they're racist, or is it both? Or
I think it can be both. There are certainly some professors that come to mind where I think that they probably are conscious of it and they don't care, or they have actually said to their classes that they don't care in ways or another, one way or another. But I do think also I think most of it is the unawareness, the ignorance to their own biases and problematic tendencies. There are a lot of professors that do incredibly good work and are, they, at least in terms of their choice career, they fight for the community, and they are they're very active and progressive. They're liberals, right? And but there's still a level of hesitance, for them to continue to self-examine and continue to learn, because they think, well, I'm already here. I'm a lawyer and I'm using my skills and my time to help oppressed people in my legal day-to-day, so I'm kind of already doing enough, or I'm a professor, and so I'm doing a good job. I teach everybody. What do you mean? I have Black students in my class. They love me, and so I do think it's a lot of that. It's a lack of awareness, but I think it comes from a place of refusal to self-examine, in my opinion.
It's a reflection of it. What you just described is a reflection of the outer world as well, because that's the thing that I come across. People say, well, my family didn't have slaves. And I go, keep going back, keep looking back. They're in there, or like, I didn't do this, or I have Black friends, or, that thing. But what they don't realize often is there are things that they say, ways that they behave that we all recognize. And they don't even know they've done it. And that's the consciousness that. So I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more specific about the demands that you made? What was in the demand letter? What changes are potentially available through those demands that you've made?
Nikki, did you want to go?
Yeah, so the demand letter, so a lot of law schools were kind of putting together a list of demands after the George Floyd murder, because we felt like the power was kind of in our hands, and institutions were so quick to change. We were just like, let's ride with the wave. These situations have always been there, but we were like, okay, like, now it's time to ask, and hopefully they're going to give us what we ask for. So it was a lot of just like equity demands, like we need to have like more scholarships for Black students. We need to have mandatory trainings for professors to make sure they are anti-racist. When incoming students are coming in, we need to have them read like the new Jim Crow and books like that. So it was a lot of just like equity demands in a sense. And then our two big ones were, we wanted to have a mandatory class structured around like racism in the law, and how just racism interacts with different sections of the law. And then another one of our demands was we wanted specific classes to discuss how racism interacts with these topics. So, for example, in my criminal law class, my professor did not mention race once, which I thought was very interesting. But on the other hand, other professors had like a race week and then like a rape week, and I didn't have that. And it's just weird to discuss criminal law without discussing how it affects Black people and other minorities.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of our big demands.
Yeah.
How was it accepted? Or go ahead.
It was the equity demands, I think, were like other Black law students associations or whatever their names are at other law schools. Like, to me, it's sort of like it's a step-by-step guide almost. It's a perfect outline for how the school can, put their money where their mouth is, basically, or, actually implement, because schools, institutions of any kind can talk and talk and talk about being anti-racist, but if your professors are not being realistic about or they're not teaching the reality of how race and class and gender, whatever it is, actually is impacted by and intersects with law, they're doing a disservice to their students, and especially to their Black students and queer students or whatever it is. And that really needs to be taken into account by every school. So to me, the equity demands, they range from things that we want to see happen in the classroom. We even had one that was related to, we have security on campus and how they were being trained, because there were a couple instances of Black students being stopped on campus and questioned as to why they were there. And they're like, I go here, I'm a law student. And so we even had a demand for retraining the campus security officers. And just the whole idea of it is to make Black students more comfortable, and like Nikki said, make it a more equitable place for Black students and students of color, but also just to sort of force the school's hand in, you guys are talking and so much about, you want to be a part of the movement, you want to be anti-racist, and you want to call yourself a diverse anti-racist institution. So show us that you'll do it, and this is how you could show us. And so that's what it is. And yeah.
So is this the demand letter? Is that something that went out through email to all the faculty, or how did that happen? Is that presented to the dean? How did that How did you issue it?
We Yeah, so we had a good working relationship with a couple members of faculty who were very helpful in helping us draft it and review it, and then also in bringing it to the faculty. I think at this time, yeah, Nikki and I had already been invited to join the Equity and Inclusion Committee, and so we were the only two students that were on it. Or I guess there was another BLSA member formerly that was on it for a time, but then she left. But so the two of us were on it, and so we sort of had a direct in with a lot of these faculty members that were helping us write it, and we, went over things with them, and then we sort of picked a date for when they were going to have their next faculty meeting, without students, and it would be a meeting of the entire faculty, and they would present it to the faculty essentially. And once it was finalized, I believe it was sent to the dean of the law school, and some other people that are sort of high up in the chain there, and then it was raised at the faculty meeting, and it was very well received.
It was very well received. That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So it was very well received. So what happens now? They were like, yes, this is a great idea, but what happens now? Things are beginning to be implemented, or that happens next year, or,
Yeah, well, a lot of the things that we asked for, they were kind of already doing. We just wanted to make sure that they were going to continue to do them. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the mandatory anti-racist trainings for faculty, they started those while we were drafting the petition, and this is kind of because we had a great relationship with our Dean of Equity and Inclusion, and she knew everything that was going into our proposal. So she was working basically as we were drafting. She was working on these things. Mm-hmm. So like the mandatory trainings, the scholarship situation is a little sticky because of COVID. Of course, funding isn't available, so they say. But they have implemented a couple things. Beatrice, do you want to talk about the learning outcome?
Yeah. So I think one thing that we had originally proposed to be one of the main demands was a mandatory class, that all students would have to take this class in order to graduate. They would have to show units and pass this class or write a paper or something like that to show that they were learning about race in the law. Instead, and then also another demand, which is what we actually got, was for the school to implement what they call a learning outcome. And the learning outcomes basically are like goals of the school. And once a law school sets a learning outcome, the ABA, the American Bar Association, is notified of that, and they then they come every couple of years to the law school to ask the dean for a write-up, like a report of some kind, to say, how are you meeting your learning outcomes? How are you have to be able to show us that you are actually having students graduate with this knowledge that you say that you are going to be teaching them. So they did adopt a mandatory learning outcome that has professors focus on the intersections of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and, things of that nature. And that was adopted universally by the school. So now, every couple of years, the dean of the law school is going to have to show the ABA how students are understanding the intersection of law and these things, these different markers of someone's identity and personhood. And then recently, before the summer, we got it so that the learning outcome would have to be adopted and actually integrated into every one first-year foundational course. And we wanted that to happen. That was really important because the upper division classes, the upper level classes had already adopted that. But the professors have some discretion, in how that they would personally do it in their classroom, whether or not they would personally bring the learning outcome into their classes. So there's a chance
Mm,
that a student can come and navigate their way through law school and never have to learn any of this stuff
right.
the way that it was
Yeah.
set up before. So now that it's been adopted so that it's mandatory for all of the first year courses, there's no student that is not going to get at least a snippet of this information. And in your first year, you take criminal law, civil procedure, property law, you take contracts law, and tort law. And I think those are like the main mandatory first year classes. And so now every first year professor of these classes is going to have to know it themselves in order to teach it. But
Right.
your property professor has to be able to talk about how property law intersects with race and class and gender and all of that stuff. So you can't just have a property class anymore and breeze over the fact that property law essentially started when white people were stealing land from indigenous people here, and they come up with like insane property law to justify that. Or you can't take a property law class and not talk about racial covenants in neighborhoods and how black folks were
Mm,
excluded from being able to buy property places and stuff like
mm,
that. I mean, hopefully that will not happen anymore. And then also like Nikki's story about taking a criminal law class and not being taught about race and criminal law. Like that is crazy. So with this mandatory integration of the learning outcome, ideally these professors are going to focus a lot more and throughout the entire course, not just for 1 week. We don't want professors just saying like, okay, on this week we're going to talk about race, and
right.
they're just going to throw a bunch of statistics out and be like, this is how many 2 and 3 black men will be arrested in their lifetime, whatever, blah blah blah, and just regurgitate statistics that do nothing to help anybody. But actually consistently raise the issue and you know make it clear to students that this is something that as lawyers you're going to have to be conscious of for your entire career.
Well, doesn't that require that those professors also do deeper study? Because how completely aware are they of the things that they need to talk about?
Yeah.
So what is required of them in order to be able to teach the class?
Yeah, it does require them to do a lot of work on their part, but part of our equity demands was also to have our institution give them the materials
Ah,
and equip
yes.
them to be able to teach these things, because we don't want them doing more harm than good, of course. Because as we started off with, there are some professors who are just not aware of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So our plan is for like somebody, Francesca, you'd be perfect to come in and maybe teach them a little something.
Mm-hmm.
And they can really like navigate their classroom, because at the end of the day we got a sense that they also feel awkward still talking about race,
Yes,
and this
yes.
is kind
Mm-hmm.
of how we are in the situation that we are in because we've avoided the conversation for so long. So at the very least we want to get them comfortable so the black students in their class are not uncomfortable.
Yeah, so that was kind of my as you were talking, I was thinking, so the discomfort that the black students have felt, do you believe that they have had a shift to feel a little less uncomfortable to as an individual student, demand what it is that they need from the class without being concerned about being thought of as a problem or whatever? Do you feel like there's a shift inside of, and I ask that question because I tell white people all the time, the black people that you knew before George Floyd are not the same black people that you're looking at today. They simply are not. We are unapologetic. We're unapologetic about being black. I even started I have a whole t-shirt and hoodie thing about unapologetically black. So do you believe that enough of a shift has taken place within those black students that, so this professor is teaching and maybe there's some things that they don't realize that that student can speak up and help to be a part of the learning, maybe? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I guess I'm just asking about the level of comfort.
Honestly, So it is really hard to gauge because we've been remote all year. So we
Yes.
haven't been
Yeah.
in the class with students. But I mean, certainly throughout this year, I was hearing students complain about certain things that happened in classrooms, and they didn't feel comfortable to speak up. And or things happened in a couple of my classes, and I didn't necessarily feel comfortable to speak in the moment. And that's the good thing about BLSA, having an organization like BLSA, because then, they can come talk to us, and then we can talk
Yeah.
to faculty that we trust to hear us out and actually do something about it. So that's been done. But in the moment, I do think it's really hard. And it's not just, you know, set aside the fact that we've been remote and it's been a pandemic all year, and that's just made everything all the more sensitive and whatnot. When a student, when you start law school, it's incredibly intimidating. It's an intimidating environment for many, many reasons. And your first year classes are, 80 people, like there's like 60, 70, 80 people in every class. So it's not surprising at all for me to hear that someone wasn't comfortable speaking up in the moment, because you are not only confronting a professor who, knowing our school, is likely a professor that is, has a great reputation and is beloved in the legal community and has great connections. And part of law school is about networking. Part of law
Yes.
school is about like kissing ass and getting
Yes.
jobs, honestly. Like,
Yes.
so,
Yes. Yes.
so there's that too. So you don't want to, get on the bad side of somebody who potentially could be very helpful for you or could really ruin a lot of things for you. And then also, I do think also there's hesitancy, because sometimes people, it's almost like being gaslit. You wonder if you're like, am I being too sensitive to this? Am I, I don't want to be, yeah, like you said, like I don't want to be the problem. I don't want to be the only person speaking out. So you don't want to single yourself out in that way. And you kind of like, I know when I was in my first year, a lot of my attitude was just to like, keep my head in my books and get by. Like I was busting ass in the library all day long, because you just want to survive the first year. Your goal is to just survive the first year of law school, get through it, pass your classes so that you can move on to, bigger, better things. And so especially as a first year student, I think it's really hard for people to speak up. And I do think that it's a little too soon for us to know really
Yeah.
how
Right.
the faculty has changed, because, and also we've been remote, so I just can't see it. Like I only see my one professor at a time through a computer screen. So I think once we're back on campus, we'll definitely get a better feel. I think we'll get a much better feel. And then, future generations of BLSA are going to have to continue this work and continue the pressure on the faculty, because it's absolutely not going to change overnight. There's just too many of them, and
It's
they're
not going to
tenured.
change without
So
the pressure. Without the pressure being there, it just isn't going to change, because a white person's world is just too comfortable. They can be comfortable in the world where we're so uncomfortable. And it's another thing that I always say: it's time for you to be uncomfortable. We've been uncomfortable forever. It's time for you to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry if you're uncomfortable, but let's just like face this together. So
I feel like I've personally felt a shift with myself
yes.
in speaking up. I know during one all year, like Beatrice said, everybody kind of just tries to fly under the radar. But I
Yeah.
think Loyola has done a good job, like declaring themselves as an anti-racist institution, and that helps once you realize that they're on your side.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I would have spoken up before if I knew that things would actually change. But now, like, post George Floyd, Loyola has appointed a dean of diversity and inclusion, or equity and inclusion, sorry. And she's kind of like the go-to person for any troubles that students are having. And that definitely helps just with like morale and support when you're going through these types of issues, because before there was really nobody to go to.
And I would just say
that's
sorry, I was just going to say she's phenomenal. I think like in terms of, appointing somebody to take a job like that, she really cares and she works very hard. And
can we say her name?
Sure, I think
can we say what her name is?
So it's so Kathleen Kim, and so
because I know Kathleen Kim.
Yeah. Oh, great! Yeah,
she's been on my podcast.
The Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion.
Oh,
amazing! Yeah, so we love her, and I think that she's doing a great job and will continue to do a great job. So I just wanted to put that out there because, like we were saying earlier, so many schools and businesses were doing the thing where it was like, we're hiring more people of color, we're doing all these trainings, we're appointing people to these diversity positions, and you see nothing for it really at the end of the day, except a brown face, a black face on a website somewhere,
exactly.
Whatever it is.
That's exactly right.
And I think that, and I do think in that sense that Loyola's done a great job in putting her there, and she's done a great job with this position so far.
I had friends at other LA law schools that will go unnamed who they gave their demands list to their deans and they just shut it down completely. And they were like, we are not doing any of this. Yeah. So, we're definitely grateful to have Dean Kim. And sorry, go ahead.
You talked about shutting it down. Since I have you, what's your thought about the whole critical race theory situation we're in here?
I think it's an absurd conversation. I just think there's no place for it, and whenever I hear people saying critical race theory needs to be banned, it just sounds absurd. Like, I can't even engage in it.
Yeah.
Because I sat through several years of classes of being taught history wrong, and now we have the opportunity to correct a wrong that has been done, and nobody wants to do it. People want to do it, but of course there's people who are very against it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, critical race theory is critical, but I love critical race theory, and I wish that people weren't so dense, honestly, because it gives you an entirely new perspective on things that you never would have even thought about before, and you're able to put it in terms that are, almost scientific. I think when you start reading some of this stuff, your mind is just it's blown, but not in a way where you're like, oh, I never, I'm shocked because this doesn't make any sense to me. You're shocked because it makes so much sense, and you're reading it, and you're like, this is, of course this is how it works. Of course this is where folks are nowadays, because historically, look at what's happened, so the conversation, like Vicky said, it doesn't need to be a conversation. Critical race theory should be everywhere, period. Like, it doesn't need to be but the people that are pushing against it are irrelevant to me. They're not in the sense that many of them are very powerful, but at least in terms of my personal life, I can just say, like, you're irrelevant to me. I don't care about you.
Exactly. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Ah, yes. It's been so beautiful talking to the two of you. How can other people support you? I mean, is there some kind of way that I can lend support in any kind of way, to what it is, or other than, my thing is I pray always. So I can certainly keep you upheld in prayer. But is there any way that people can support you, or anything that additional that we need to know?
Prayers are always welcome.
Always.
Maybe if you come across,
go ahead,
just any resources that would benefit faculty, not just in like a legal sense, but I know you said that you were teaching a class to non-Black folks.
I would love to teach a class to your faculty. I would love to teach a class.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. I've been teaching a class, because you talked about restrictive covenants, Beatrice. I have been teaching a corporate class to Compass Real Estate. And there was an unawareness from some of them that the language of restrictive covenants still exists. And so some of them have gotten on this bandwagon to support the legislature to take that language completely out. Because even though it's not in your paperwork when you buy your house today, you know, it still exists. And I'm the metaphysical world. There's a vibration that it's holding. So get the language gone. It needs to be gone completely, and that's something that's happening. And a lot of them weren't even aware of it. So, I mean, there are so many things that people are not aware of, even in their own industry. But for me, there's the important things about your industry, about law, but the biggest thing is about you as a human being. Is your heart open? Is your mind open? Or do you have empathy? You know, those are the things that I teach. But enough about me. We were talking about you. So, yes, support for the faculty. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I think, like, life extends beyond law school, and obviously law extends beyond law school. And I think what bothers me so deeply is, like I was saying earlier, people that get super impassioned in the moment because it's all over social media and all over the news and they want to be a part of it and then fall off. That is something that hurts me so deeply and hurts everybody. Yes. I know. And so I think, honestly, for me, like, the best way that you can support, law students, Black law students, Black people in general, is to keep the fire and, like, stay learning, stay, criticizing, and stay growing, and also, be aware of how lucky you are, like, recognizing your luck and your privilege and, like, the situation. It's sort of like, something I've been hearing a lot lately in the public defense world is, there but for the grace of God go I, right? That's something, especially when, if you really learn about how the legal system is, like, you could end up in a bad way so quick, and you will be destroyed by this system. Like, once you're in it, it is so hard to get out. And I am thinking, particularly about a lot of criminal law, but really in any sense, like, if you're in debt and the government's coming after you, how do you get out of that? Like, how, if you're in a situation where you can't pull yourself out of poverty because you are unable to get a job or whatever it is, like, I think people just need to continue to think about this. And I think when you start thinking about it and start realizing how lucky you are to not be in some of these situations, that will really make you want to change some things, because, there but for the grace of God go I. Like, that could happen to anyone at any time. And I think that hopefully that helps people to stay in the fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your statement, Beatrice, of how it hurts. I don't think they understand how they're hurting us when they are performative allies. When they turn their head this way and then they move back to their life, and our heads are still turned over here. We're still enduring this. We're still suffering with it. We're still living through it. It's still being thrown in our faces, and they're turning back away from it. It's painful. It hurts because you think they're right there and they're like, well, where'd they go? So I think that statement for them to hear is important. Thank you. Final word from you, Nikki?
No, I think Beatrice covered it all. I'm grateful to have friends who are continuing to learn and reach out. But at the same time, there are people who have just, like, deleted the black square from their Instagram.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, so it will, to support your Black friends and colleagues, I think the main thing is to just keep learning, and just don't be a performative activist, because that hurts more than helps, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you, in this system of law, had the opportunity to create such dramatic change just so because it's upheld. Racism is upheld through law, and so the opening of minds and hearts and the enlightenment that you're demanding to have happen, I'm so grateful to you. And I'm just knowing that, and you say it's happening at all law schools, so that's wonderful. That there's a shift without question that we are in, and that you are a major beneficial part of it. And I'm grateful to you both and all the people that you are involved with. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be watching and listening. See what's going on.
We will not
Loyola.
let you
down. Okay, I know you won't. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank
we
you.
need you because we need each other.